Hey y'all, it's Katja again, your Food Corps AmeriCorps service member with Harlem, and I'm back here from my kitchen to share a few kitchen tips with you guys. So as a lot of people are doing in this quarantine, I'm kind of feeling baking some bread. Challah bread is this beautiful traditional Jewish loaf that's braided, and I grew up eating it as French toast on the weekends. So like I showed you guys last time, I like to set up on my mise en place. So I've got my flour, my sugar, oil, eggs, yeast, and here is how I keep my salt. So I keep my salt in this little container here that is sometimes called a salt pig, and it's so that it's really convenient for you to take a pinch out while you're cooking. I much prefer that to keeping it in the actual box or the can, because this way it's accessible at all times. Obviously you don't have to keep it in this exact, same container that I have. This one I just think is really cute, so I got it. You're just looking for something that has a wide enough opening so that you can just take a pinch of salt whenever you need. So even though I went to culinary school for the culinary arts rather than the pastry arts, I actually prefer baking to cooking. So I bake pretty often, and one of my favorite tools when I'm baking is my scale, which is something that's really helpful to have at home. You can find them for pretty cheap. The scale really helps you get accurate measurements. Because flour is made up of super fine ground particles, it can pack down a lot, which is why you get so much variation in how much flour 1 cup is, depending on how you're measuring it, how packed down your flour is, etc. But guess what? Not everyone has a scale during this time. Not everyone's gonna be able to get one during this time. So I'll show you what I do to try to increase the accuracy when I am just using my cup measures rather than actually measuring out my scale. So I keep my flour in this nice jar. This is just all-purpose flour that I'm gonna be using today. I filled it up very high, so it just spilled, sorry. So again, if you don't have a scale, I'll show you guys my little hack for what I do before I scoop, which is I'll just take a fork and I fluff my flour up so it's not so packed before I go in to scoop it. I actually just did a little experiment to see what the difference was, and if I have packed down flour, my cup weighed 150 grams versus if I fluff it up with my fork, it weighed 135 grams. The difference is only 15 grams, but if that's happening over 6 cups, say in my recipe, that ends up being like an extra whole half cup of flour that's gonna be in my recipe, which can really impact the texture of the dough at the end of it. I've already got my 1 cup of flour in there. This guy is 4 cups, so fluff, fluff, fluff. Take my cup measure, I scoop in, and then I'm gonna level it off because you want an even level of flour in your cup. It's not as important to fluff your sugar. I'm using like a organic cane sugar here, but I do get these little chunky lumps because it's so humid in my apartment right now, which is fine. It's just gonna go in. I have my instant yeast. Instant yeast is immediate acting. You don't need to bloom it the way you would have to with active yeast. So he's going directly in. And my nice salt piggy pinch of salt. Don't underestimate the need for salt in your bread. So I've mixed together all of my dry ingredients. You can use a whisk, you can use a fork, or if you're a monster like me, you can just use your hands to kind of toss it together. Other kind of random things I do when I'm baking, if a recipe requires oil and a measure of water, I'll always pour my oil first and then I'll pour water into the same cup. It just helps me get all of the oil out of the glass because it'll float up. I mean, you don't need to do that, it's just something I happen to do. When I'm adding my wet ingredients to my dry ingredients, another thing I like to do is just create a little well in my dry ingredients. It's not like super necessary again. I just like it. It keeps things contained. I like things to be neat, if you can't tell already. I also will always break my eggs into a separate bowl rather than directly into my mixing bowl, because if your egg is bad or if there's an issue with it, you just ruin the whole mix. So it's good to, just plop it outside. Do that here too. And then I mix them together. So those are my fun kitchen tips for the day. I'm gonna get started baking this challah bread, and I hope to see you guys again on the farm soon.